Hi friends, Angelica here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm taking part in Pinkfresh Studio's holiday release blog hop. This release is all about the upcoming holiday season, and I'm really excited to share 2 Christmas cards with you. I used 2 new layering stencil sets for my cards, and I finished them with foiled holiday sentiments. There's a lot to share, so let's get started. Let's take a quick look at the Holiday Ornament stencil set. This stencil set has 4 stencils in it. I am only going to be using the first 3 stencils and using the coordinating die to die cut the ornaments. But if you used all 4 stencils, it does make a single panel card front. Now, the first stencil is a little delicate. It's got some delicate pieces, so I'm going to spray some pixie spray on the back of the stencil just so it has a tackiness to it and will stick to my panel. One thing I do like to do when I when I spray the back of my stencils with the pixie spray is I will push the stencil after I've sprayed it and let the adhesive dry. I will push it onto printer paper, and that printer paper is going to take off a lot of the stickiness. So that is not on the cardstock that I'm going to be blending ink onto. Each stencil has a guide in the corners, so when you do put the stencil on your card front or on your card panel, the guide will let you know exactly where to position it on your cardstock, so each layer is laid in the same place. I'm going to be using Post-it notes to cover the ornaments that I don't want to be blending ink on yet. Starting with the orange ornament, I picked apricot and persimmon inks. I blended the apricot ink first, and then I added the persimmon ink with a small blender brush. The smaller brush makes it easier to add ink just to the edges, which I want, so that dark color brings more depth to the ornament. Once I was happy with the colors, I used a paper towel to wipe the excess ink off the stencil and then moved on to the next ornament. The yellow Pinkfresh Studio inks that I used were Sunshine and Marigold. I moved the Post-it notes to mask the other ornaments and blended Sunshine over the stencil. And then I used the same small brush to add the darker Marigold ink to the edges. In fact, I used this one brush for all of the ornaments. This is the only brush I have in this size. So once I realized how I liked how much ink it would put down, and it just made the job really effortless. I had a baby wipe next to me to clean off the bristles after each use, and then I dried it on a paper towel, and the texture on the paper towel really helped lift the ink off the bristles. Moving on to the red inks, I'm using Fruit Punch and Berrylicious. The Fruit Punch is a lot lighter with the blending brush than the Berrylicious. The Berrylicious just turned out really rich when using the small brush. So I did have to pay attention because this ornament is a lot more narrow than the other ones were. So it was very tempting to make it become one color. So I had to remember to leave a little bit of lighter color in the middle of that ornament. And once I'm done stenciling, I took that stencil off. I liked what I saw on the panel, so I did take the stencil to my sink and I washed it with warm soapy water to make sure it was completely clean before I started the next set of ornaments. I blended Candy Violets first for the purple, and I'm using Regal Kiss to darken the edges. And moving on to the blue, I started with Slumber and am using Blue Jay to ink the edges. And you see I'm using that paper towel just to make sure I don't have any purple left on those bristles. And then the last ornament that I'm doing is green, and I used Meadow and Evergreen colors for that ornament. So that takes care of the first stencil. I did do the second stencil off screen, which the second stencil adds the ornament toppers to each ornament, and I did that with apricot ink. And now I'm on the third stencil, which adds the ornament and topper details. I used painter's tape to hold the stencil and the paper down, and now I'm inking the orange ornament with persimmon ink. And I'll be using persimmon ink to for all of the ornament toppers as the detail color. So I'll be reusing those post-it note masks that I had used with the first stencil. So I don't get the orange ink on any of the ornaments and vice versa. I'm finishing up with Marigold Yellow dark ink on the ornament and moving on to Berrylicious on the red. I'm just going to be reusing the dark colors that I used on the ornament edges for all of the detail work. Again, masking off all the ornaments right now so I can get that persimmon ink on the toppers. And then I will be moving on to the dark colors again, purple being Regal Kiss, the blue, I used Blue Jay, and green was Evergreen. Now that my ornaments are all done, I'm going to use the coordinating die to die cut them. Now this die is one piece, and had I used that fourth stencil, which stencils on the tree limb and Merry Christmas, that die would die cut all the pieces. So um, using that guide that's on the stencil, the four corners, really keeps all of the pieces together, and it's really convenient when it comes to just having to use one die to die cut all the pieces. I pulled out my folder of red cardstock scraps to find a bright red panel that would be perfect to add an extra pop of color to the card. I wanted to make a slimline card, so I found a piece that was long enough and I die cut it with a rectangle from Slim Diagonal Stitched Rectangle Set. And I die cut white cardstock with the next size rectangle that has this stitch on it. Now for the sentiment, I used the new Perfect Sentiments Holiday Hot Foil Plate and the coordinating die. This set also has a coordinating stamp set if you don't want to use a hot foil plate. I used my Gemini hot foil press to first foil gold sentiments, but I don't think I let the foil plate get hot enough. So since that was the last of my gold foil on that first press, I moved on to red foil, and that worked out great. These sentiments are so shiny and crisp, and I ended up running that red foil negative through my machine again and to make even more sentiments from that one piece of foil. Die cutting the sentiments was super easy. I used the coordinating die and taped it down to the panels, making sure that I had an even amount of white around each letter. And then I die cut the panels in my die cut machine. I even die cut the gold, even though most of the gold sentiments didn't work out. I was able to save a few for a future card. I'm prepping my cardstock now to get it put on the card base. I like to use a sand block to rub over the edges, especially if I die cut the panel. And that's just going to take off any little slivers that's still on the paper after, it gets done in the die cut machine. To attach the panels together, I added double-sided adhesive to the backs of the panels. I took the backing off the middle strip of adhesive and I carefully attached the panels together, making sure everything was centered, and then I used my reverse tweezers to take the rest of the adhesive backing off and repeated the process to add the panel to the card base. And the last step for this card is adding the ornaments and the sentiments. Now I already added a little bit of double-sided adhesive to the backs of all the ornaments, and I'm just going to use a little teeny bit of liquid glue around the ornament toppers just to keep that part of the ornament nice and flat on the card base. And I'm also making sure that my placement is even when I'm adding the ornaments to the card base. And for the sentiment's the only thing that I want popped up off of this card, so I used thin foam squares to back the sentiment with, and I used a 0 center ruler to make sure that I added that sentiment in the middle of the card base. And that's going to finish this first slimline card. For the second card, I used the Holiday Botanical Background Stencil Set. This is another 4-piece set. Now, I already did the stenciling off screen, and I used the same green and red inks as I used in the first card. Now, the reason I'm sharing this step of the card is because I wanted to show how using colored pencils is another way to really elevate your stenciled panels, adding more depth. Now, doing that with the first card, I used the small brush and the darker inks. And for this card, I started with a really sharp indigo blue colored pencil, and I used that pencil just to follow the stenciled line. So it gave me a really nice dark sharp edge. And then I used a coordinating green pencil or the red pencil on the berries to blend that really sharp blue line out. And it really just completely transformed the the botanical background. I used a white gel pen to add highlights to all of the leaves and berries, and I picked a sentiment that I had from my die cut panel to put in the middle of the background, and that's going to finish this card. I am in love with these stencil sets. They're so easy to use and they coordinate so well with the foiled holiday sentiments. Now that's all that I have for today. I want to thank Pinkfresh Studio for letting me be part of today's release, and I want to thank you for stopping by. If you liked what you saw, please give this video a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more, be sure to subscribe. I'll be back shortly with another video, so I'll see you then. Bye.